6. Racial white sacrifice confusion. This term applies. Racial white sacrifice confusion. This term applies when the white supremacist racists speak and or act to dominate and mistreat non-white people by doing great harm to themselves and or allowing others to do great harm to white people. The white supremacists sometimes do this in order to cause non-white people to believe that white supremacy does not exist and or in order to cause non-white people to believe that racism is not a serious problem except for the few who have chosen to make it so. The white supremacists often intend to confuse non-white people by showing that many white people suffer and die from neglect and or mistreatment. The white supremacists often present this condition as so-called proof that white supremacy exists only in the imagination of a few people who have guessed incorrectly that white supremacy racism continues to exist. The white supremacists function in the manner of sophisticated gangsters. They often fight and kill, sacrifice each other in order to settle arguments about the best way to dominate and mistreat non-white people. They regard these battles against each other as sometimes being a part of the cost of doing business, the business of white supremacy. The white supremacists never allow their white sacrifice business battles to become so self-destructive that the entire system of white supremacy suffers serious damage. In addition, after each white sacrifice, they immediately began to repair the harm that they did to each other. They sometimes praise each other for their dedication to agree or disagree on what is the best strategy for maintaining, expanding, and or refining the system of white supremacy. They often praise and mourn the white people who were sacrificed for the greater good of white supremacy. The white supremacist racists function as a racist world army. Like soldiers in a war, they are sometimes willing to risk sacrificing themselves or other white members of their army, the system of white supremacy racism. The white supremacists also function as a racist world business. Like people who are in the business of dominating, and like people who are in the business of dominating and mistreating people based on color and factors associated with color, the white supremacists are sometimes willing to risk sacrificing themselves, other white people, or other white members of the family business, the family business, which is the system of white supremacy. They make these white sacrifices in order to best help maintain, expand, and or refine their domination and mistreatment of the non-white people of the known universe. They regard their activities as patriotic. They regard their activities as patriotic and as the very best so-called good business. Good business, business, business. Okay, I like that. I like it. I like it. All right. Good deal, good deal, good deal, good deal. All right. Question 8. Can blacks be a competitive group without group self interest? It would be very difficult for black Americans to become a competitive group if they cannot shake the unique social conditioning imposed on them during 5 centuries of slavery and Jim Crow semi slavery. Normally, a group that has been systematically oppressed for a prolonged period develops a heightened sense of group consciousness, self interest, and closes its ranks against outside threats. Blacks appear to be different. The 21st, the 21st generation of Black America remains bound by lessons learned in slavery that strip them of a group self interest. They remain altruistic, dedicated to the welfare of others before themselves. They love everybody, are forgiving, long suffering, hard working, self sacrificing, dedicated to taking care of others first, and look for a reward in heaven after death. Today, that mindset has resulted in blacks who believe that because of their long status as sufferers, they ought to be conscious of the nation and the world. Few black ministers tell their congregations that it is actually against Bible instructions to sacrifice themselves, abandon their homes, families, and race to save others, regardless as to whether they are immigrants, ethnics, homeless, impoverished, gay, or any other fabricated minorities. Blacks carry the moral and civil rights banner for all people, while most people look out for themselves and ignore the needs of the black masses. In a race based society, every group is competing to win in their own group self interest. As a group, by not having self interest and being altruistic, blacks lose by default. They are poor and powerless. Their labor and culture have enriched nearly every group on earth except their own. With a sense of self interest, a group with a sense of self interest, a group can recognize competitive advantages, opportunities, and ways to protect and build on what has been on what it has that is valuable. With the sense of self interest, a group can recognize competitive advantages, opportunities, and ways to protect and build on what it has that is valuable. Wonderful. Wonderful. Success will come only when they can unify and compete in the best interest of the group. Andale, pues.